Hi guys, welcome to the Late Night Drives podcast. My name is Prashast Pitti and I'm going to be one of your hosts for the next 15 or 20 minutes. What is Late Night Drives, you ask? Well, it's a place where we discuss life with motor vehicles. It includes news, views, and maybe even some reviews. Alright, let's get into it. I want to talk to you all this first week about car design. We've all seen ugly cars, right? I mean, your definition of ugly may be quite different from mine, but don't tell me that you haven't seen any eyesores moving around, that you've looked at it and just wanted to like ask yourself why. How the hell did something like that get into production and onto our roads? And you would think there were multiple layers of approval required, right, to get something like this into production and to get vehicles like this onto our roads. And you would be right. But, I always wondered how come designers never stepped back from their creations, really looked at the whole thing together and seen that, okay, this really doesn't make too much sense. My definition of a good looking vehicle has to have smooth lines, really clean, cohesive design that looks great from the front to the back, neat headlamps, neatly integrated tail lamps. These are all to me parts of like a good design. And there are so many examples of like the complete opposite of this, right? I mean, off the top of my head, I have the Pontiac Aztec earlier, Sangyongs, and these are like examples from the world. From India, we have so many more examples. You have like the original Reva, the KUV 100, the Mahindra Quanto, the early Yamaha Phaser 125s. They were all, well, to put it nicely, different looking. They all had their own design quirks that to me just didn't make sense. I just didn't understand how people like the marketing department heads and again chief designers and stuff just gave the go ahead for these designs. So on the one hand, in the Indian market we had these really ugly products, and on the other you had what I'd like to term as ugly ducklings, because like the fairy tales, they actually ended up doing really well in the market despite the way they look. And off the top of my head, I can think of examples like the Suzuki Espresso, which it was like a really oddly designed vehicle, which to me seemed like pretty much a tin can on big wheels. And you have the Hector, which sort of was like a mishmash of various cars. There was really no cohesion from front to back, and I don't know, I just didn't see how that worked. But I mean, both these vehicles seem to be doing really well. The Espresso continues to sell in the top 15 vehicles in India. Of course, the Hector commands a waiting period of, I think, a couple of months at least. This sort of thing begs the question is, do Indians really care about car design? Or is it just value for money that matters? And when I say value for money, I mean the most amount of space you can get for your money, the most amount of tech you can get for your money, the most amount of features you can get for your money. What really matters to the Indian consumer? I don't know if there is one right answer to this. So, why do I bring up car design in this first episode? Well, earlier this week, Mr. Pratap Bose, who was VP of Global Design at Tata, resigned and decided that he wanted to move on to a different challenge or greener pastures. He was the man who was responsible for the revival of Tata and their whole new impact design language and impact 2.0 design language, which I think has been key in actually turning around Tata's fortunes and them doing so well, especially with the latest products like Altroz, the Nexon, the Harrier, and even the Safari. So clearly, somewhere design does matter to the Indian consumer. And this guy was also one of the people who was key in designing various concepts that actually had really great international recognition, which was stuff like the Racemo and the H5X and the H7X. And it's just sort of sad that a stalwart company like Tata has lost such a person. But hey, here's to wishing Mr. Pratap Bose all the best, and we hope to see some of your newer designs into production again soon. Now let's talk to our guest about car design. So today we have with us Ashwin Maheshwari. He's an old close friend of mine. He's worked in the automobile industry for some time now. He started off with Burak motorcycles. He went on to Rajputana motorcycles. Then he took his hand up with painting and airbrushing at iMore, and now he, with along with his dad, they run a workshop called Checkered Flag in Hyderabad. Hi Ashwin, how are you?
I'm good, Prashast. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. So, as you know, this week's episode is basically about car design, and I was thinking that since you're someone who's somewhat in the design field, uh, what according to you constitutes like bad design?
For me, bad design always, there's nothing bad or good in a design. Maybe something that could look flawed on a car or on a bike might look better on something else. So it when we talk about design, or when I, at least the way I look at design is, if something adds value, it counts as a good design. But there are a lot of things in today's world, like when we talk about today's generation's cars, when we talk about the older generations as well, there are a lot of cars which have unwanted, like maybe you could call it accessories, or you could call it just the trims that they put onto those cars, or just that little line that they decided to add, just didn't add any plus point or a wow point to the design. That is what made it flawed. See, when we talk about today's cars, like what is there in today's market as of 2020, 2021, when we look at the tail lamps, when we look at the headlights of today's cars, when we see that LED light is going through the whole rear end, lighting up
Yeah,
their fucking the Ford Endeavors, the Endeavors being lit up, that's, according to me, that's a little bit of an eyesore. Like even the
yeah.
new Creta from the rear end, the way the tail lamp is a little bit of an eyesore. Like when we talk about Hyundai, when we talk about Creta specifically, the first generation actually looked decent.
It looked
It didn't look
decent. I don't know what they
it.
did with
Yeah,
the second generation.
I,
Yeah,
I,
right.
I guess it's just I guess it's just they wanted to make it a little more modern. Like how all these new Audis are. It started with the Audis, with the whole the rear end being a nice light up, and they've always had a different kind of a rear end where even the blinkers go off in a different way. It was never there with a Merc. It was never there with a BMW. It was never there with any regular car. But today, if you look at all our cars, 99% of these cars have these indicators which go like, right, I'm going right, I'm going right, which was initially started by Audi. But now, what I feel is actually creating the bad design, what we call, or an eyesore, is the lower manufacturers. Okay, I agree. Like even the public wants more for the value of money that they're giving you. They want a little more, but they need to draw a line as to, you're just going across that line and you're like, okay, I'll give this feature as well, I'll give this as well, which is actually making it a clutter, which is actually making it eyesore.
Okay, so that's
That's
actually the point. I was going to ask you that. It was something that you said that it started off with the Audis and all, and now it's come to like. I mean, let's take the Creta as an example, right? There's a huge price difference, and then there's a huge segment difference
correct.
also between the two cars.
Correct.
Isn't that a good thing in some senses that
So
these so-called premium features are coming down towards like
it's actually a brilliant thing because the technology is being shared.
yeah.
It is being accessed by a lot of common people. Don't, like, I would never say that, like things like CarPlay, electric seats, power windows, which was never actually there in lower end cars, are today there. Like you have a good system, you have Bluetooth, you have, first, if you ever bought a even if you bought a Skoda, you would never get Bluetooth in your initial cars.
Dude, I remember the
In the
first Skoda I
Mercs,
had a cassette player,
the
man.
Octavia, yeah, it had a cassette player.
Yeah.
And at the same time, around the same time, at least, the C Class 204s, the 203s, they came with, okay, the 203 maybe came with a parrot as an additional accessory. But the 204 started getting only the telephone Bluetooth. The BMW started getting the telephone Bluetooth, and they started losing their own, those hardware, those cell phones that they had in their BMWs, which were,
Mm.
I don't know, I've never seen anyone use them, but someone has,
Those
like, it's good for
hardline
them.
phones,
Yeah,
which
those
it
hardline
looked
phones
like
where
a
you put a
landline.
SIM,
You have to like pick
you
it
pick it
up,
up, it
dial
has
the
a cable,
phone.
and you're like, okay.
Yeah, yeah, those are
It's like,
quite
okay, you
ridiculous.
just, it's like, oh, I
Yeah,
just have a car phone. Yeah.
yeah.
Contract.
So yeah, essentially, like my next question was going to be that how is like car and bike design changing, like for you, according to you, like as someone in the field, and is it changing for the better or worse? I think you
See,
spoke about it a little more,
no,
a little bit already.
no, when we talk about design and the way it's changing, you cannot. take it to be like from a first generation Creta to the latest generation Creta. That's maybe a span of not even 5 years. Like, I don't know how long
I
the
think
Creta has
what
been here.
7 years,
Seven
six, seven
years?
years it was on sale because there were one or two facelifts, right?
I think there were two facelifts, if I'm
And
not
even I
wrong.
think there were two
But
facelifts.
so
See,
even
that
like
that
when we,
period is also shrinking, right? I mean, your
yeah,
facelifts are
it
becoming
is.
more and more
See,
frequent.
I think every 2 years you're getting a facelift for every
Yeah,
car. Like you buy an Octavia today, we bought an Octavia. What do we get a year? Like
yeah,
the next Okay, it's not yet come in India, so at least we have
yeah,
that to hold. But officially, it's launched.
yeah,
The new
yeah.
Octavia it looks killer. Like I actually like the way they've made it. It's a lot more sporty. It's aggressive
Hmm.
because that RS would look really mean when we're
Yeah.
245 again.
I've seen pictures of that, the
Correct,
VRS
correct,
versions
correct.
of the
VRS
new
version.
Octavia.
It,
They look good.
but
They
I guess
really
in
look
a
good.
lot of, I feel like in those pictures it's been dropped down a lot more than what it would be on road
I think that's
because it look
because generally European cars are anyway lower. No,
yeah
they're like 30
like
mm.
in
I
India,
know, na,
yeah,
trust
in
me. You
you
know
got
how
your
I
coins,
know.
correct.
Yeah.
You got your coins.
I had lowered my
Uh,
cars for like listeners who don't know. I lowered my cars to was supposed to be a 40 drop, except it was 40 for Euro spec drop. So in India, it ended up being like a 70 drop, which it looked bloody great.
Jaw dropping, jaw dropping.
Yeah,
That's no doubt.
but the ride was a little questionable. Let's put it the nicest way. The ride is a bit questionable.
Yeah, that's the nicest way to put it. That's for sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when we technically talk about design, I still do. I would always talk about design as it comes from our vintages to here. You can never say like we are still in the same kind of design era that we were 5 years back because we're still thinking on the same lines. We're just making it a little more sharper, a little more edgier, making it a little more aggressive. But when we talk about the older vintages, like if you even take the iconic cars, if you just take like the Jags, if you take uh, from the smaller car to from Beetle to even a sporty, let it be an XJ or let it be a Roadster, the older cars were a lot more boxier. They were a lot more bulk than what today's cars are. Today's cars, the amount of plastic that we use is ridiculous. Like an old car, you can go hit into anything; it's not going to make a lot of difference. But today's car, you do a slight touch, and maybe you're looking at a good bill. Personally, I always have preferred the old school looking bikes and cars. Like even like you've seen the 600 Pullman that we have, the 600 Grand. Sorry, it's not the Pullman. It's
Isn't
all
it?
green.
Isn't it like S600
It's
grosser? No.
it's called a grosser. Grosser in German is basically a bigger or a greater thing. So
Oh,
actually,
okay.
it's
I didn't
called as
know
an
that. Okay.
S600 Grand. So grosser
Interesting.
is basically it's a German word.
All right.
So
Cool.
this is not a Pullman. A Pullman is supposed to be bigger. I really can't like fathom the
So a
length of
Pullman
that
is
car.
essentially like a limousine kind of thing, right? For
Limousine,
lack
yeah,
of a
it's a
better word.
limousine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
And this
limousine.
is it. This is like a pure four door, but it's the size of like
It's
probably a
a yeah, it's the
limousine.
size of no, but see when you think about it, you've seen the Mercedes for the six S600 Grand, and like for our viewers who haven't seen it, also if any one of them Google it, S600 Grand 1970 1974, it's a long ass Mercedes. You've seen it. Like it takes if today's even if you put an S class today, that short wheelbase still is longer than a regular S class.
Yeah, yeah.
Like those cars have a lot more, I would say, character to it than what today's cars have. Even like when I worked with specifically Rajputana, like Vijay Singh is he's God when it comes to design. There's no doubt about it. His eyes fucking different. He always used to say the same thing. This is where I learned it from, saying, if it's a design, it can be anything. It can be even a dot on something. But if it adds value, it's good design. If it doesn't, then you got to think of something better.
Mm.
And when you look at his bikes, the bikes that we worked on, they're all so like they have some kind of it is a little old school for a few bikes. It is a little modern for a few, but mostly when you look at his iconic bikes, they're all with girder suspensions, like big ass tires in the front, like a simple tank with simple paint job which stands out, just the simple brass and the engraving. The fact that you get back these old techniques of getting engraving a part of your design, getting these small brass elements, and not doing too much. You're not making it like a bling ass bike where you're putting 100 things on it. You're just putting these
And
small
chrome.
ass.
That's your
Yeah, and yeah, like you
chrome for the
I
sake of
honest
chrome, at least. Yeah.
today's cars, like, look at the amount of
Yeah.
chrome you have. Like,
Exactly. That's what I was
you
trying to
you
say.
you
Like,
you see you see
it's
the
chrome for
doors,
the
you see
sake of
everything.
it. There's no
There's no
any
taste
sort
to
of
it. There's
nothing
Yeah,
at
like,
all.
why do you want to do your handles chrome? Why do you want 10 things chrome? Okay, for a few cars it looks phenomenal, but
No, but
for
you
a
have
few, I
stuff
just
like
just
the
think it's
BMW
over the
X7, which has like
that
a
that
grill
that
that's
chrome is, it's a mouth.
I,
Like, it's like a,
it's not even a mouth, actually.
yeah,
It's like a
yeah.
mansion's gate or something, you know?
Like those bars, like, you just,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's like a,
ridiculous.
it's ridiculous. Like, even so, like, when like, even the Creta, like we were talking about, Creta
Yeah,
also has so much chrome for no reason. Like,
yeah,
that grill
absolutely no reason.
is,
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous. Like, I guess people also, it might be a reason because people in today's, like, everyone does like bling. We can't, maybe we are like
Well, I mean,
few
maybe we are the
few
exceptions,
people
right?
who,
Maybe. Yeah,
we are
yeah.
maybe the few people who don't like it. But a lot of people actually come to, like, I know friends who, like, gotten their Harleys like full chrome. I'm like, why? Oh, it looks nice. You can see your face. I'm like, you have a side mirror, like a rear view mirror on both your ends. You can see your face in either. You don't really need to. You're not gonna peep into your bloody
Not to
exhaust or your
mention, if
engine.
you're riding a bike, you should be wearing a helmet, so
You're
you
not.
can't see your face
No,
anyway.
no. Even if you're not like riding and you want to see your face, you have two perfectly good mirrors. Why do you want, like, your
You don't
chrome to
need
be
your
that bling?
airbox to be the mirror, right?
Yeah, you didn't don't need your. I know people who've done it, like, on their engine, like the full engine's chromed, and
Wow.
you can't, of course, buff the main bore and the head.
Yeah, yeah.
It's buffed to an extent, so, but the head is shiny as hell. So you go into the head and you just do that, you'll see yourself. I'm like, really? Is this why you're doing it? And your foot pegs, your exhaust, everything is bling, bling, bling.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Mm.
Not my thing. Like, if it was up to me, I'd make all my chrome black or carbon fiber.
I'm in a similar boat. I mean, I suppose like my thought process is very similar in that sense. Maybe that's
Very
why we're
similar.
friends. But anyway, going back to something you said earlier about earlier vehicles design and how someone like Rajputana motorcycles, they use earlier traditional craft with like brass and stuff to bring out different design elements in their motorcycles. I'm sure you're aware of the growing popularity of the restomod scene. Not in India, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's more to do with like stuff abroad. So whether you
US.
have the
Yeah.
Singer Porsches, you have the restomod Jaguars, you have like a whole bunch of vehicles
Correct.
like going through the
Basically,
restomod scene.
the most iconic cars now are going into resto mods. Like, a lot of people who just do 911s. They just rebuild
Yeah, yeah,
911s,
yeah.
make them mint, and sell them off. The guys who do the E-type, the guys who do the GTOs. But of course, these cars, like, are very rare. They're very expensive.
Actually, what I was trying to ask you was, do you think that there's a possibility of some sort of resurgence of old vehicle designs in India, going through that resto mod scene and stuff? Actually, that's
I
what I was meaning to ask you.
see
Um,
see resto mods it is already a scene in India. If you ask me, like, there are people who are restoring them, but when we talk about resto mods, they specifically not always original. Like, they're not genuine to the T.
yeah,
So
yeah. I
in
mean,
in
that's the
in Europe,
modification
in
bit of
US,
it, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So in the US, in the UK, or let it be the Europe, like, more or less, I would say the US, because they're the least strict about all of these things. So when it comes to them, they have the money, they have the
yeah.
sources to source. Like, you have a old, maybe it might be a nice 911, you want to soup it up, they'll put an LS2 in it. They'll put a massive block. They're all big block fans.
Yeah.
They don't believe in anything
A
less
lot
than
of
six cylinder.
Europeans, a lot of other people might have just been
All
like
of them.
cringing listening to an LS2 in a
Yeah.
Porsche body, but
No, but I
anyway.
so I have actually, like, so there was this one, I came across this in on Facebook. It was a very like laugh about thing, So there's this guy in the US who bought himself a 911. Like, he bought himself a Boxster or something, 1960s, 1970s. So he decided to take that car in. It's a powerful car. It's a six cylinder, naturally aspirated. It's a six or an
Boxster
eight. I'm not
released after
sure
the
actually.
90s, man. But anyway.
Boxster released after the 90s.
Yeah.
No, then I don't know which 911 this was. So it's like a 60s, 70s. Okay, so this guy
Okay.
wanted to take it in a drag,
Okay.
and he decides to put a big block. And he's like, no, the best big block that you can find is an LS2, because it's a very common engine. You get
Yeah,
it
yeah,
second
yeah.
hand easy, it's cheaper, blah
Yeah,
blah
yeah.
blah. So you put a LS2 engine to it, okay? And I'm not even kidding. Like, if you read the comments on it, like, people, Porsche lovers
Yeah, it's
were
sacrilege.
so
It's
like,
sacrilege.
like,
It's as
yo,
simple as
yeah,
that.
but there are people who, so in India, you'll never get a resto mod, but restoration, the want for vintages in the recent past has really shot up. There are two ways of looking at these things. People who like the old school because there are no electronics. But the minute you do a resto mod like this, where you actually, put a full powertrain in, you're adding a lot more electronics into the car,
Of course,
which
naturally.
which which according to me is a good thing, only because that car was not meant for that kind of power.
Yeah.
So a
No,
little bit of
it
electronics
of
won't really
course.
harm you, but
Plus, chassis strengthening, general powertrain strengthening also. It's not like the transmission can take it, so you have to change the transmission. Everything
you have to
changes
change it.
accordingly.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. The minute you say powertrain, the whole, like, it's a full swap. It's a full swap. It's only the shell and the chassis being used. The
Yeah.
chassis also being like completely reinforced, strengthened, and then only used.
I was
But it
fearing
is.
this. We'll go down a rabbit hole and we'll talk about it for half an hour and not stick to the point. But anyway,
So the point
the
was,
point
we were
was
talking about how.
we were talking about is it really feasible for a restomod scene to happen in it?
Maybe not a mod, but a restoration, yes. I would
Okay,
always give you that answer.
cool.
Of course, you can get it done in X budget or a double X budget. That doesn't make a
Okay,
difference. But
that doesn't make a
restoration
difference. Yeah.
is, yeah, because see, there are people who do it. Like, there are various people who do a lot of kind of work. So in India, even if any, like, maybe now for a lot of Indians, your Esteems, your old Marutis are also being restored. Like, they're trying to keep it in mint condition, hoping that someday that becomes of really good value.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people who actually care for their Esteems and, like, for their Maruti 800s, and they come up to me and they're like, "Sir, it's rusting. Can you, like, do a patchwork?" I'm like, "Okay." Like, the fact that you're
Yeah.
taking so much care for it,
No,
hats off. So
it comes very neatly to my last question, which I
yeah.
thought was going to be a little bit of a fun thing, which was since we're talking about like resto mods in the country, I was thinking like what was something if given unlimited, obviously, resources and given parts, what is something that you would consider as resto modding in India? That's something that was on sale in India, right? So I'm not saying bring
Mm,
like a Porsche, 964 or
mm.
whatever and do it. I'm saying something that was like on sale in India, whether it's a car, bike, whatever. What is something that you would do like with unlimited resources? Yeah.
Very difficult question, to be very honest, because, like, I don't have one. Like, I can give you a list of
Okay.
maybe
Throw out the top thing that's
five,
on your
10.
head.
But see, the top, what I'm actually working on, and even you've seen the car, like the 911, the Targas that we are working on, like,
Yeah.
we've always had, like, the day it came in, like, my jaws dropped. I'm like, dude, I want to drive this car when it's restored. Then
That's not
the
what I'm
pains and
talking
efforts
about.
that you're
I'm talking about something that's like a dream
that
project of yours
I
that,
would.
yeah, do personally for yourself. Yeah. And that's a restoration that you guys are doing. I'm talking about a pure resto mod.
If I ever had the choice of buying myself and restoring and modifying a car, I'd pick either one of three. One I wouldn't mod one bit, which is the gull wing.
Okay.
The E-type is the other, which I
Okay.
wouldn't mod. I
Okay.
just keep it like as is. The GTO is one which I wouldn't mind modding. Like it's a
When you
beautiful
say
looking
GTO,
car.
you mean like
The GTO 250, the Ferrari GTO 250.
Ferrari. All right. Cool.
It is it is a it is a
You're
it is yeah. See, when you say unlimited resource, that's why I said like it's difficult. If you talk realistically today, I'd say maybe a Padmini would work. Like I'd love working on a Padmini or a Contessa to actually do like a resto mod where I could put a bigger engine. It's a really nice looking car. With a Padmini, I'd do like a rally edition. It would
Yeah,
look.
so
I
see
think it would
that
stick
probably makes a little more sense, and I'm just trying to ask you
realistic.
from
Yeah,
that point
yeah.
that like
No.
realistically
Realistically, I
something was
would
on
say
sale. Yeah, because a 250 GTO
realistic,
is uh,
bro. Yeah,
what was the
yeah.
last one that was sold for how much again? Like $1 billion,
Yeah.
something of that sort.
A
Like
couple of, if I'm not wrong, it was a couple of billion. If
yeah,
I'm not wrong, it was auctioned for something, a good cause or something. And
yeah, yeah,
yeah, even a gullwing, where you gonna get a gullwing? Where you
yeah,
gonna get an
exactly.
E-type?
Yeah,
E-type is actually an E-type is possible. Like
it's
there are a few
possible.
E-types in India, so
Yeah,
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 that's still possible. But a gullwing and a GTO is not so.
yeah.
It's not really possible. But
All
yeah,
right. So
like if
I came out with a
even
list. Like I came out with like a very specific thing that I would do,
hmm,
right? Like I would get like one of the first generation Maruti 800s.
hmm.
Okay. And I would put like the last gen Baleno, not the Baleno
Yeah, I get
hatchback that's on
the
sale right
sedan,
now.
the sedan,
The
the
sedan
sedan, the
Baleno,
sedan, the old
Baleno
school OG
1.5
Baleno.
liter engine,
Yes,
1500 cc, nicely turbocharge it so that you're like in the Maruti
yeah,
Suzuki same family you're sticking to it. Ground up
correct.
rebuilt with a like modified chassis and
But
powertrain to handle the extra power.
and
Keep it as a
it likes
two-seat thing.
yeah, it has to be a two
Yeah,
door. It has to be a
yeah,
like okay, maybe if you don't do a two door
yeah,
also. But when you talk about the first gen Maruti, you talk about the slant roof at the back
yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
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 That
That's
just
the
you
design
can
that I
imagine.
like, dude.
Yeah, you can imagine just that little perfect spoiler sitting on
Yeah,
top with the
yeah,
whole thing just to bring that drag
exactly,
down.
right? It's that pocket rocket
That's a
feeling.
yeah, it's a
That's
pocket rocket. It's a pocket
that's where
rocket.
I would go personally. But
The even the
yeah,
but that actually is a very like it could go like a rally. It could go
yeah,
like a proper rally car.
I think it would
You
be a
could
great daily man. It's the perfect size for this
it
this city,
it
this
is it is
country,
it
this
is a
time.
perfect size, but the only issue would be our country should allow it.
Yeah,
That's the
fair
only
enough.
issue. Like
That's like
at
a
least
whole
when you
different episode.
yeah at least
you know.
oh yeah, modifications
Yeah,
in India should be a whole new
yeah.
episode. Like
It is
you
going to
can't
be
do
a different
much.
episode altogether.
No paint, no nothing.
This is dream scenarios, right?
Yeah, this is no. So when we talk about dream scenarios, like even a Contessa with the same kind of thing actually looks real. Like it could be a not maybe not a small pocket rocket, but it's a really beautiful looking car and like
Agreed.
drop down and
The OG Indian muscle car,
it's
right?
yeah the
Yeah,
OG HM
yeah.
Hindustan Motors.
Hindustan Motors.
Yeah,
What would be
even
the
the
engine you
ambassador.
would put in a contest? And tell me something. A, would you keep it as like
If
part of like trying to be part of like the Hindustan Motors
see,
family of some sort?
I can't do that because there aren't really great engines with
Yeah,
the
like
Hindustan
what is
Motors.
there
But
apart from the
there
Isuzu, that random
is
1800 cc engine, right?
the Isuzu is not a bad engine, but
So it's not a bad engine,
it's
but
not a
like,
power. It's not a fun engine. It's not a fun
yeah.
engine. Maybe in that, if nothing, I'd go for a VTEC or something like that to put in because a VTEC would fit in like it's a good size. The VTEC
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty small because your Contessa also doesn't have a lot of space inside the hood, so at
Yeah,
least it
yeah,
would maybe sit perfectly there.
yeah.
That's what I would swap it with. At least not a lot of power. Beautiful inline four with a nice exhaust. Give it a nice blow off valve. Oh, dream,
All right.
dream.
On that awesome note, that sounds cool. Thanks a lot, Ashwin, for being here.
Thank you, Prashant, for having me. Cheers again.
Cheers. Take care. All right, guys, thanks so much again for listening to this first episode of the Late Night Drives podcast. And we hope to see you again soon in our next episode. In the meanwhile, you can always follow us for updates on our social media channels. We are at Late Night Drives on Twitter. That's late with an L8 Night Drives. And yeah, you should get your latest updates on our podcast there soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.